All right, so let's talk a little bit about web services. Web service is a technology that uh, we invented a little bit before the turn of the century, and the intent was to make available resources.
From another room.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. We wanted to make available resources that were on the network to make them easier available for other folks. The intent was to make it easy for disparate systems, different frameworks to better integrate with one another. Right. The idea was that you had a factory, and that factory needed to communicate with a financial institution. Needed to communicate with some governmental institution. Needed to communicate with vendors, their own partners, and everybody had their own way of interaction. Right? They all have their. Some of them were manual. You had to actually pick up the phone and talk to someone. Some of them were electronic, and it was very inefficient if everybody was speaking a different format. Everybody had their own schema. It was very common that everybody had their own database, their own infrastructure, their own programming language. It was just a mess, right? Just to have these folks talk to one another. So what the idea was that, hey, how about if we leave these the way they are, right? As long as we can wrap that with some bubble, right, that can abstract whatever's in there, and just abides by an agreed upon interface, right? If we can all agree on that interface and the particular format that we're going to exchange, we could talk to one another, right? So before the turn of the century, big folks like Oracle and Microsoft and Sun Microsystems and a lot of folks, these big players were competing to see who could make it easiest to create web services, right? To allow the plethora of these companies to be able to better integrate one another, right? The way they sold it to us was that you're going to be driving and I can look up on my mobile phone, which back then there were no smartphones, but I can see my plane, and I can immediately make sure that I had a place to stay when I get there, a hotel. I can immediately also see that I'll have a car that I can rent, and all these disparate systems would talk to one another to make my life easier, right? So if I go on to Chicago, then I can search for any number of airlines with hotels and rental cars, and everything talks to everything, and they all talk to one another, right? And back then, the idea was, hey, let's wrap everybody in a web service, and then we'll all talk XML, right? XML was really big back then. Was the way to exchange data across the network. And many solutions were made available. WebLogic, WebSphere, all these big servers back then, they were all competing on, hey, press a button and boom, you have a web service. Anyway, it was very, very exciting time. Although we failed miserably at the actual integration. It was much harder than we thought it was. Integrating disparate system was just a huge mess. The database, all databases had their own schema. Some of them were very normalized, some of them were not. You would spell something one way, I would spell it another way. I would have certain data types. You would have certain. So just synchronizing these databases and reconciliating all this data was just a huge endeavor. Today, web services, the dream is still on, but today we see a lot of the big folks that are collecting lots and lots of data, making their data available to us through these endpoints, these HTTP endpoints. That we can query and just retrieve data. It's become something very, very popular, right? That Amazon and Yelp and Best Buy and big stores and most a lot of the medical data, a lot of the FDA, a lot of the information is available online, right? You can just query and just learn anything you want. That today it has moved from data being represented as XML. More commonly today, the data is more and more being formatted as JSON. Only because a lot of these applications that were initially desktop applications have been moving slowly but surely onto the web, and the language of choice on a browser is JavaScript, right? So if these are going to be JavaScript servers, clients that are going to consume data, well, might as well format it at least in a format that the language is gonna be able to parse. Anyway, so as part of this effort of being able to make data that typically would be part of the enterprise, right? That would be localized for that one, within a particular business. Those businesses were looking for other ways to monetize this data, right? It says, well, if I make it available to other folks, right, I can provide some value to other folks who can benefit from that data, and I'll charge something over. It's data that I already have locally, right, that I use it for my business. If I could integrate it and monetize it for other folks, perhaps I can increase its value, right, so that instead of just me, other folks can benefit. So a lot of effort went into how is it that we make this data available? Are there any standards we can adhere to? Okay, perhaps not on the there are two questions really. One of the question is, well, how do we encode this in a standard way? And there were a lot of efforts. Even the UN got involved as well. Trying to create a unified, worldwide set of schemas that certain industries would abide by, right? So if you were in the car rental industry, then you would have certain endpoints that your rental car should provide. If you were in the hotel industry, if you were in the chemical industry, if you're whatever industry, there were certain endpoints, right, that you would have to abide by, right? And those were those were interfaces that presumably your web service would implement, right? So that so this would allow websites such as Kayak or Orbitz or any of these, right? Be able to do a query to all sorts of airlines, the same query. This person wants to go from A to B, and these are the parameters, and everybody could answer the same question, right? So as long as they all abide by the same API, right, that query can go out to multiple vendors, right, and they can all respond. Right? So the same idea of making interfaces and polymorphic accesses to these network resources. So definitely there was a lot of effort on doing that, standardizing these APIs. Right? There was also a lot of effort at standardizing the schema, right? That the data that you provided, right? If you're asking for a flight, you need to tell me a GPS location you want to go from, another GPS location of your destination. You need to give me a date. You need to give me whether it's a one-way ticket, a double. So all the schema of the query was also standardized, right? And also the results. The results will be an array with all the flights information that meet your criteria. Okay. Another standardization that was done is the way we query these endpoints, right? The way we query these endpoints. We tried also to standardize how is it that we would allow you to query certain things, that this somehow mapped to some schema, right, or some relationship with the data that you had stored in your database, right? That there was a mapping between the URL that you were using to retrieve resources on the network. So part of that effort was to use these URLs very much like they were originally intended, right? It's a universal resource locator, right? Universal with the United States as the center of the world, and everybody else. And then obviously universe as in anywhere in the universe. That was the original intent, right? So I guess when Elon Musk sets up Mars, we'll need to include that too. Although it'll be like is it a 30-minute query to go back and forth to Mars? So those queries will be very, very long running. Okay, so nevertheless, the URL, the intention, the original intention was that you should be able to identify any resource, right, in the universe, right? And this should be you should be able to uniquely identify any resource in the universe, right? That was the intention, and that somehow resources are neatly organized in some hierarchical schema, right? This is very computer science centric. We think we can model the world in a tree. The world is just one big tree with some root, and then we can navigate anywhere, right? That route being maybe Google, and then I don't know where it goes. Anyway, so presumably these are some hierarchies, right, that will allow you to navigate some namespaces, right, that would allow you to go from something very high level down to something very specific, right? The most common use of these URLs today is just finding a web page, right? You type a URL at a browser, and then it comes back with some HTML page or whatever. But originally, they weren't just intended for web pages. Okay, so today we'd like to expand on this idea, where these are not necessarily directories, they're not necessarily files. Right? Instead, they might be maybe a table. Okay, this might be a record. Okay. And just expand what it is that you can map this to. Presumably, you can map it to anything you want. Right? But today, we'll say that the database itself is a resource. Right? Tables are resources, and records are resources that you should be able to navigate. Right? We'd like to be able to navigate through this data set. All right. So let's talk about this today. This died. My laptop died.